Again, thank you everyone for coming. So today's the Unity workshop. I know it's been a hot topic, but we'll talk about that later. But yeah, who here is actually going to follow along with the Unity workshop? I see some hands.
I just downloaded it.
Let's go, everyone, pretty much. Perfect. So, if you haven't already, I posted this on Discord, but you can also just access it through our club website. We have a downloads page. If you go to our student organization page.
You got it.
Yeah, so go to the downloads page. And then in here, it'll be the first one on there, Intro to Unity, dated today at the top. So if you want to download that asset pack, it'll have all of the resources. So I'll just do it as well, just so people can see it. It'll take you to Box. Hopefully you can access it. If not, let me know. And then once you're on this page, there is a download button in the top. You could just click that. It should automatically download. And then you can just unzip that somewhere so you can access stuff. Boom. And then inside of here, I have two folders. One is called Start and one is called Key. Start is what I'm going to have you use today. The Key is like if you want to see everything in its entirety complete. There's also an entire copy of the assets folder where you can see the final product or final product. So if you want to like mess around with stuff after the tutorial, then you're more than welcome to. Okay, so why don't you go ahead and open up Unity. Or Unity Hub, technically. So Unity Hub, if you're unfamiliar, is basically just like a landing platform, if you will. It just has like all of your projects listed and stuff. It's an easy way to manage the different like versions of Unity you have installed. There's also a learning tab over here, which has a lot of tutorials and stuff. These are really cool. I don't know where the simple ones are, but some of these tutorials, like the publish your first mobile runner game, usually what happens with those is you can like download a template and it'll open up Unity and give you a step-by-step guide through the editor on how to actually make stuff, which is really nice because there's so much stuff on the screen, and this will like literally highlight sections for you and tell you like click this button and it'll do this thing, and it's they're pretty informative. So I've done a couple of them just to see what they're like, and they're actually really nice. But if you ever want to do something on your own, I would recommend looking through this tab, or just YouTube channels works too. But anyways, assuming you have at least one install, I just recommend 2022 or newer just because the further back you go, the more stuff changes. So this will help help you follow along if it's more recent. But it should be pretty much the same. Why don't we go ahead and click on New Project. Once you hit the New Project button, you'll see this screen. It gives you a bunch of different like templates, basically. Like if you're making a different type of game, like if you're making VR, it would adjust the settings for a VR game, so you don't have to like do all that yourself. But in our case, we're just going to make a 3D game, which is already like downloaded and pre-installed. You can change the project name to whatever you would like, and you can change the project location. I just have mine in a folder. And then go ahead and click Create Project. And this will take a little bit, especially if you're on battery power. Unity is quite a heavy software.
A few minutes later.
Yeah, the first time you open a project, the first time you create a project, it usually takes several minutes. Once you go to just open it regularly, it takes like 30 seconds. Maybe a little longer if it's a big project. Okay, so while your guys' computers are doing whatever, I'm just going to take a little tour around the editor, just so you can kind of understand everything that's going on here. There's a bunch of different windows, and they all have different purposes. Some of them you'll use pretty often, and some of them not so much. This scene, or sorry, this window down in the bottom, you can see like the grid view and stuff. This is called the scene view, so this is where you can actually like edit things in the game. It allows you to like modify objects, drag them around. If you're editing a level, it'll allow you to like place obstacles, trees or whatever. This is basically where you build the levels and stuff in your game, in what's called a scene in Unity. And there's various tools to help you do that. Here on the left, there's several of them. These do different things. The view tool, the first one, the hand, wish I could make it bigger for you, but this allows you just to kind of move around the scene. You can drag. You can also use the scroll wheel to zoom. Following is the move tool. This one you can just move objects around. Rotate tool, rotate objects. Scale, you make them bigger or smaller. This one, the rect tool, I only use that on UI, but it allows you to like resize boxes. And then whatever the transform tool is, couldn't tell you. But yeah, and then the next scene or the next window that you're going to use the most is the one directly above it, which is called the game window. And this is what you actually see when you play the game. As of right now, there is absolutely nothing in the editor, so all you see is like the void below and a sky. But you'll see things change as we keep going. There's also the hierarchy here on the left of the game window. This just shows like a list of all the different objects in the scene. So as of right now, by default, every scene is created with a camera, so you can actually kind of see what's going on, and a light source that's supposed to emulate the sun. So if we actually like place a cube in the scene, you'll see shadows on it automatically, and that just comes built in. But this is where we'll be able to see like list. Once we start adding things and making it into a game, you'll see all of them pop up. On the right side, you can see when I click on an object in the hierarchy, it changes a bunch of things on the right. So this is called the inspector. This is where you can actually edit the values of things. The thing at the top, or it has like the name and stuff at the top, and then it has all the different components below that. And a component is just like basically a script that you can add that has different values. So the one that's on every game object by default is called a transform. And the transform just has the position data. So like what position you're at, how is it rotated, how is it scaled. So you can change that for every object. If I want to like change this one up and down, can't see anything right now, but we'll also talk about this more later too. See, this camera one, for instance, has the camera script on it. So in the bottom left, we have the project window. This is where you can handle and like mess around with all the different assets that are in the game. And when I say asset, I'm referring to like something that is on your computer that you load into the game. So like a texture, a sound, a script, something else like a different like save file or something that you use in your game to actually like make things look cool. So and then next to the project window, there's another tab down there called console. And this is just a debug console. So if you've ever done programming before, you should be hopefully familiar. You know, the console.log statements, they all go here. So if you ever have any errors or problems, you'll see it. It'll tell you what's up. Pretty straightforward, hopefully. And then at the top, there's a bunch of like file, edit, assets. I'm not going to go over all of these because that's a lot of stuff. But I think some of the important ones for sure is the project settings. If you go to edit and then project settings, this allows you to change a bunch of different things, which we'll come back to. Anything from the editor itself, you can change different settings with how things load. The input manager, you can change like what button is the jump button, which we'll talk about, as well as you can modify the physics or gravity or whatever. And the player project settings are also important. This is where you can change the name of the project, the version. If you want to change the icon that appears at the bottom of the screen in the taskbar, this is where you do that too. But yeah, just so you know that's there. Okay, but yeah, let's insert the actual assets into the game or the engine. So go to that folder that you downloaded, and then after you've extracted it, you should see inside of there start and key. We are going to simply just select the start folder and just drag and drop it. Project. Drag and drop it into the project window.
Under assets?
Under assets, yeah. And that will automatically copy everything into it. There's other ways of doing this too, but this is the easiest way in my opinion. So after you do that, it'll take a second, but then it will copy everything. And now you can see all the assets that we will be using today. Don't worry about any of the stuff in here yet. You'll see it come into action. Okay. So let's start with adding the ground to our scene. So Unity, in the hierarchy window, if you right-click, it'll have a bunch of options that pop up. A lot of them are grayed out. That's okay. But at the bottom, it has a bunch of pre-built-in like prefabs or like templates, I guess, of different things that you can make. So for example, if you go down to 3D object, you'll see it has like cube, sphere, capsule, a bunch of different shapes. And these are really nice, especially for prototyping. If you're just trying to make something really quick and just have a proof of concept, like say a game jam, for example, you can just have it create a sphere, and then you can use that as a player or whatever until you have an actual model to put into the game. Or if you need to actually use it on the game, that's cool too. But for right now, we're going to go to 3D object, and we're going to make a plane. And this will just create a flat object on the ground, or in the scene. And we'll use this as the ground, so that we can move around and jump on it and stuff. I'm going to reset the transform. Resetting it just sets all the values back to default for it. But yeah, if it's not selected already, select plane in the hierarchy window on the left and then go to the right. And you can either manually set all these values to 0, so it's centered, or you can right click it at the top on the, like where the name is for transform, and hit reset, and that'll do the same thing. It'll put everything at 0. You don't have to do this, but I like doing it so then everything's centered. And you can see now we have this plane in the middle. So yeah, down in the scene view, now you can see that it's there. Should be next to the camera and stuff. And next, we will make it look a little nice. So with models, if you've ever done modeling, you might have heard of something called materials. So a model is basically just a collection of points in space with a bunch of triangles where you can then take that and visualize that as a object of some sort. So like our plane here is technically, I guess, a model or a mesh. But something more complicated would be like a player or like a world, a planet or something, or a tree. Those are all different models. And models have materials. The materials define how the object looks. So we can have like a color, could have a texture that is applied to the model, or we can have like different lighting things, such as like how much does it reflect light, or cast a shadow or whatever, right? So why don't we apply something to the ground so it is not completely white. If you go to the material folder that is inside of there, there's already some in there. We're going to create a new one though. If you right click down there in the assets folder, and then go to create at the top, there's a huge list of stuff. In the middle, there is one called material, and we will click on that one. That one will create a new material for us. And you can name it whatever you'd like. I'm just going to call it ground material. And now in the inspector, we have a ton of different options for what we want to set it as. For example, if you want to change the color, you literally just click on this white box and it'll open up a color menu for you, and you can change it to like green or something. So let's just do that for the time being. And then after you've done that, now if you want to actually apply it to that object, all you have to do is click and drag the ground material from the project folder into that scene view at the bottom. And if you hover over it, it'll change color. So if you let go, it will apply it. Now that object has that material. Okay, so the ground is all fine and dandy, right? But we want to actually play the game. So if you navigate to the prefabs folder in the project window in the bottom left, there are 3 different things that I have provided for you. We have a baddie, which is a bad guy, a ball, and a player. So why don't we drag and drop the player object. In addition to dragging and dropping it into the scene, if you drag and drop it into the scene, it will always drop it wherever your mouse is. If you want it to just default to a location, like the center of the screen or whatever, you can actually drag and drop it into the hierarchy in the top left, and that will put it in the default position, which in this case it is at the center. And so let me just explain what prefabs are quick, because I kind of glazed over that. Think of a prefab as like, not necessarily a model, but it's a collection of things to make like a template. So in this case, like we have the player, it has everything already set up. So now if we drag and drop it into our scene, we could have like 1 of them, we could have 10 of them, but they all come from that original copy, which is the prefab. So you're basically just making copies of it. But what's nice is that it's not a straight up copy. Think of it as like a source almost. So if I change the prefab after I've already put them in the game, like say I decided I wanted to make it 2 times bigger, I could change the scale values to 2, and then that would automatically update every copy of it in the scene, which is really nice if you want to change something later, so you don't have to like select all of them and change them all individually, because that's a pain in the butt. So this saves a lot of time doing stuff like that too. Yeah, you'll see that the player is bright pink, which is not what we want. So why don't we also create another material for the player. Right click and material. But yeah, go ahead and make a material for the player in the meantime. Change whatever color you'd like. For the ground, I actually do have a texture for that, so let me show you. If you want to add a texture to an object, so say with the ground, we don't want it to be a solid color, we want a texture. In the textures folder, there are already some textures in there. And there's one called grass block top, which I didn't copy from any other games. You can click and drag that into this little tiny box next to albedo, which is to the right, or to the left of the color selection area. And that will insert a texture. But it looks really big. It's in the textures folder. Yep. So yeah, you can drag that into the albedo box, and that will add a texture then. However, if you see, this is quite large. The pixels are very big, so we don't really want that. If you go to the right in the inspection window, there's this option in the middle called tiling. So this will change how many times the texture repeats on the surface. So if we change this to something like 32 and then 32, you can see it gets a lot smaller, which is a little more something that looks a little better. So that's not always necessary, but if you have a smaller texture for a bigger object, you'll want to do this just so it repeats and you don't have like a million grass. Yes?
Do the files automatically save? Like,
No. So if you hit Control S, it'll save the scene. Actually, I think it saves the project automatically, but not the scene. So if you change something in the settings, that saves automatically. I'm pretty sure. I guess there's a save project option. But otherwise, the scene view itself will not save. So if you crash Unity or your game somehow, which isn't very common, but it happens, it will undo all of your saves. So yeah, if you want to hit Control S or File, Save, it'll save everything you've done so far. And then I'm also going to add that material to the player so it is not bright pink. It's red.
There's like a trapezoid on like a pyramid shape below the player. Is that a camera
Oh,
on it?
the arrows?
On does yours show that?
Oh, there we go.
I do have
Yes,
a wire for
that is in fact the camera angle, which is pointing straight down for whatever reason. I don't remember why I did that, but yeah. So that is a camera attached to it, so it'll be a first-person point of view, which we'll see in a second. I'm just gonna leave that as pink, because why not? Okay. So if you haven't already, why don't you try playing the game and see what happens? Okay, so it's supposed to be first person. Obviously, this is not. So in order to fix that, since the player prefab has its own camera, we can remove the original camera that came in the scene. So first, make sure you are not playing the game. If you are playing the game and you edit stuff, it will, as soon as you stop playing, it reverts everything back to whatever you had before. So if you edit a bunch of things and then you hit stop, it will then undo all of your stuff. So if you want to actually make changes to that save, make sure the game is not running. But then, yeah, once we do that, then you can just delete the camera by selecting it in the hierarchy and then hitting the delete key on your keyboard. Now there's only one camera, so it will default to the one on the player. So if we hit run again, if you click inside that game window, it will automatically lock in. And I added a little script that allows you to shoot a ball.
balls.
Allows you to shoot a ball into space.
Oh, I can't.
And it's, if you look at it, it is the GDC ball.
Oh, that's
Oh, oh, they just they just went through the platform.
Is that supposed to happen? Wait, do the balls ever despawn?
Yes.
Oh wait, there they go.
I said there's a timer on them. But yeah, so you can see like it's kind of working. Okay, so why don't we quickly, I'm going to scale the ground by like 10 in the X and Z directions. And that's just going to make it bigger. So yeah, if you select the plane and then go to the transform in the top right in the inspector or whatever, you can change that scaling. And then for coordinate systems, so Unity uses a left-hand coordinate system. So if you hold your hand like this is what's called a left hand. Up is Y, forwards is Z, and right is X in the positive directions. If you ever use any like modeling software or other game engines, you might hear right or left-handed. So left-handed is like this. Right-handed just means it's basically the same thing, but X is flipped for whatever reason, which is gross in my opinion. But yeah. And that's what these arrows are. If you select an object, you'll see the green, blue, and red. Commonly, those colors refer to blue being Z, X being, red being X, and green or yellow being Y. Just to give you a frame of reference. And you can also see that, I guess, in this top corner of the scene view. Yeah, I made the scene bigger, which is nice. But let's actually do something fun. or actually, I think there's one thing I wanted to point out. So if you'll see, you can run into the ball, and I will actually get stuck on it. I can roll it, which is okay, I guess, but it's kind of annoying, right? Like, imagine if you were playing a game, I don't know, and you shoot a ball out of your face, and then you keep running into it. That's really annoying. So Unity has a feature, if you have any object selected, right above that transform, you'll see it says tag and layer. And these are two different things that every object has to help you kind of organize things. A tag is just like a name. For example, you could do a player object or like boss or something. The tag just kind of helps you identify a single object in the scene that's very unique that you can add to. In your code, you can actually do a command that allows you to find it. It's really slow, I wouldn't recommend it, but it's there. And then also has layers. Layers are better for physics and stuff, which I'm going to show you here. But layers are like good for collections of objects so that you can tell Unity that we don't want them to touch each other. So if you go to the player object and select layer, and then go to add layer at the bottom, you'll see a giant list of different layers. Doesn't matter where you put any new layers, all that matters are the names. And we are going to add a player layer, which is called player with a capital P.
Add like new layer.
Yep, add layer, add new layer, and then I'll have that list. You can just put it anywhere in the list, doesn't matter. Player with a capital P, ball with a capital B, and we're going to do ground with a capital G. Yeah, we need the three of those for reasons. The scripts that I wrote are dependent on the ground, just so you can't like jump forever. But after you've added those three, go ahead and click on the player object again. Or actually, better yet, go to the prefabs folder. So this is what I was talking about with the like original copy where it changes things for everything else. Click the player object inside of the prefabs folder. Okay, and then change the layer inside of there. This is on ball for whatever reason. We don't want it on ball, we want it on player. And then it will ask you if you want to set it for all child or all children objects. We will hit yes. So the player has like the camera and stuff as children of that object. This just means that they're like attached to it, and that'll change it for all of them too. And then also go to the ball prefab, and we will also change that layer for that as well to ball, shockingly. And after you have done that, we have one more step. So we can actually go into those project settings I was talking about earlier, and we can modify the physics to say that we don't want the ball and the player to collide with each other, but we still want them to collide with everything else in the game. So like we want it to hit the ground, we want it to hit the bad guys, but we don't want it to hit the player.
Bless you.
And we can do that by going to Edit, top left, and then all the way at the bottom, Project Settings. And it will come up with this menu. We then want to select Physics, not Physics 2D, because there is a difference. One of them is 2D, the other one is not. And then inside of here, if you scroll all the way to the bottom, there's like this triangle matrix thing. And this has all of the different layers put together. We want to find the specific box where player and ball line up, which I believe is this one for me. And you want to uncheck it. So that'll basically do what I said before, and it'll be like, we don't want them to collide anymore, so they won't.
Wait, player and ball don't intersect the line funny graph.
They should. It's just in a different spot, probably.
Oh,
Okay. Yeah, sometimes it's like different. It depends on where you put them, I guess, in the layering order. But okay, and then hit X in that window. We are done with project settings. And then if you hit play again, you can see that if you try to run through a ball, I wish I made it so they weren't as tough, but did I still hit it? Yeah, you don't collide with it. You should just phase through them. It's kind of hard to see with the first-person camera, but
Can't really move around that well.
it's to like scroll around. Yeah, if you want to change, so if you go to the player object, the script at the bottom in that inspector window here, there's the player controller script, which you're welcome to look through all of the custom-made scripts that I made later. We're not going to go over them today because that's out of the scope for this workshop. But there's a setting called sensitivity. If you want to edit that, you're more than welcome to make it higher. That's the mouse sensitivity. The default's to 2, but you can change it to higher or lower if your mouse is too sensitive or not sensitive enough. And that's always something to keep in mind for like when you make games, because people might want to change stuff for themselves too. Okay, so let's add a baddie to the game. A bad guy. So we part about every what I talked about in the level design meeting last time, right, is that every game needs to have an objective or like a goal. So we're going to add a baddie. So I'm going to go drag and drop the baddie prefab from the prefabs folder into the game. Put it near the player. If you select the object in the sample scene, or in the scene, the hierarchy, sorry, and then if you, select the object in the hierarchy, hover your mouse over the scene view, and you hit the F key for focus, it will zoom into it. It's currently stuck in the ground.
So wait,
If you know who this is, good for you. But it has to do with recent topics.
Oh, that CEO. Oh, who also worked for EA, but he was deemed too greedy for EA.
I didn't say it was him. It's our beloved CEO of Unity, yes.
Probably yes.
Anyways, now we have a baddie in the game.
kind of behind.
There he is. So he is currently following me. There's a script on him that makes him follow you and stare at you constantly, which is kind of ominous.
He's gonna make you pay.
But if you click and shoot the ball at him, you'll see it hurts him. And then he vanishes.
You said it like piece to that.
Yes. So, with the script, if you go to the baddie object, there are 2 different things that you can change.
No, but I clicked it one button.
You can change the speed, how fast he moves. This is how many units per second. And then you can change the hit points, so how many times you have to shoot him to kill him. So for example, if I want to add a second baddie, if I drag and drop again, they keep spawning in the ground. I got to move them up one. So let's go to the second one that I made. Say I want to make it really ominous, right? Let's make it scale it by 5, and then move it up 5. Now it's a really big one, really big baddie. But he needs to have a lot of hit points, so we can change that too. Change the script so he has like 10 hit points, and we'll make him slow too, just so he's not. Now if we hit play, they're both behind me. But now I can shoot him. I love how it pushes him back because it's all physics based, but. Oh, he has vanished. Oh yeah.
This writes the CEO.
But we can go further. Okay, there is so much more that we can do. For example, we haven't added sound to the game. Sound is a really important part of every game that sometimes can be overlooked, especially when you're just starting, which is usually okay if you're just prototyping. But when you actually like in a game jam game, for example, it can make or break your project. Sound is really important. So I have a single audio file in the sound folder, in the audio folder, my bad, which we will be using, called John. And so if we want to actually play it, let's go to the Batty prefab. So yeah, go to the prefabs folder in the project window and then go to Batty. You can double click on it, it'll open it up in its own little editor thing. We want to go to the right side in the inspector and hit add component. So this is how you add different scripts and things. Unity has a ton of built-in ones, which all of their little icons and stuff. You can see it says component if there's nothing in the search bar. And there's a bunch of different things. You can look through them, whatever. But if you search, or if you go to audio, you can also search this as well. We want to add an audio source.
Is that what it is? Did you just spoil it?
Yeah, stop spoiling it.
Yeah.
So once you have the audio source, you'll see all these different options in the inspector for it. You can change a lot of them. You can change if it loops, which I wouldn't recommend with this sound. You can change the volume, but we want to change the audio clip, which is the sound it's actually going to play. So if you go to that audio folder in the project window, we can just drag and drop that John sound into the audio clip, and now it will be there. Another thing I also want to change is by default, it says play on awake. And what this means is when the object spawns into the game, it will play the sound immediately. We don't want that. Sometimes you do, but in this specific instance, we did not, because the way that the script is set up, it will play the sound whenever the baddie is injured. So I guess you could also have it when it starts, but then you'd get a ton of them all at once when the game starts. But sometimes that's good for, say that you want to spawn in an explosion. When you spawn the explosion, it'll also play the sound. So that's an instance where you use it. Or if you have a music, like a sound box for music. But yeah, let's hit play again. The script should automatically see that it has a sound source on it. Oh wait. I don't know if my sound is working, but it should work for you guys. John! Huh. Here we go.
I think it's fixing it now. Hold on.
John!
Oh, never mind.
John!
I needed what? Listen, I needed an audio clip to say John, and I didn't want to record myself, so I found the John Cena audio clip, and I just clipped out just the John part. It's perfect. But yeah, you can obviously use whatever sound you want. I mean, sometimes it's funny, but to do stuff like that. But yeah, the audio source is what you use for sound effects, music. If you want to get serious about it, you can also see in this audio source there is a audio mixer group under output. So if you say you want to make sound settings where you can change the volume, that's what I would recommend looking into is audio mixer group. I'm not going to do that today because it's kind of complicated. Well, not really, but it is if you're just starting. So, yeah. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Just for a basic intro to Unity, especially I did 3D this time since last year we did 2D. I thought it'd be different. 3D is honestly not much different. You just have to use different components. So instead of box collider 2D, you use just normal box collider. Instead of rigid body 2D, you use rigid body. They're all pretty much the same. They all work the same. They have the same variables. Just the fact that one has a Z value and the other does not. At least, yeah. So, does anybody have any questions? Or, yes?
When it comes to the scene thing, I know that the top right has the XYZ plans that you can just toggle it.
Oh.
On a nice switch perspective.
Yeah.
How do you switch that back to a normal perspective?
Oh, I see what you mean. If you right click in the scene, you can just like look around, change the angle. Does that solve the problem?
Yeah, that's
So wait, it says.
Yeah, so just some general navigation. If you have a mouse, it makes this a lot easier. But you can right click and like look around like a first person view almost. Or you can also middle click and that will allow you to drag. So that it makes it a little easier to navigate around the scene once you get used to it.
I have a mouse pad, so this is gonna be.
Yeah, mousepad makes it a little more challenging. It's still doable. Sometimes it's easier just to click the tools that are like here, because it's the same thing. The mouse just gives you like shortcuts for the tools. Any other questions?
Did you do jumping?
So jumping is part of the script. And if you want to look through the scripts and the assets, you're more than welcome to if you're curious. Oh yeah. So quick announcements. Next week will be how to plan a game. So like how do you actually plan stuff out to actually get started? What sort of things do you want to think about or use? What technologies do you want to use? This is pretty important if you want to make any game, especially if there's a huge time constraint like a game jam, which is in a month. So yeah, just so you're aware, the game jam is again on the 20th through 22nd of October. It's going to be in about a month. And then we also have our first social night on October 13th. That'll be right before. That is a Friday night, and we will have a room rented out with a bunch of TVs. If you want to bring like a Switch or computer or something, we'll have a bunch of games set up, as well as you can bring your own, which is encouraged. And friends if you want to, I guess. But yeah, we'll have more information on that when it gets closer.
Can you bring a PS5?
Yes. Yeah, especially if you have more than one controller. If you have just one, I mean, I guess you can, but yes.
Be different to bring a Super Nintendo.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. I usually bring my NES.
Yeah, don't have that thing.
I have an NES,
I have a
yeah.
copy of Battletoads.
Nice, I want to play that. But yeah, without further ado, go forth, make games, and be awesome. Thank you, everyone.